During the night, Paul had a vision. There stood a man of Macedonia pleading with him and saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." When he had seen the vision, we immediately tried to cross over to Macedonia, being convinced that God had called us to proclaim the good news to them. We set sail from Troas and took a straight course to Samothrace, the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in this city for some days. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate by the river where we supposed there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to the women who had gathered there. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshiper of God, was listening to us. She was from the city of Thyatira and a dealer in purple cloth. The Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. When she and her household were baptized, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay at my home." And she prevailed upon us. The word of the Lord. Uh-oh. Here she goes again. One thing that our two scripture readings have in common this morning is that they both contain visions. There was also a vision in last week's reading when Peter reported to those in Jerusalem that he had had a vision of a sheet coming down from the sky filled with all kinds of profane animals and heard a voice telling him to kill and eat. Not once did he have this vision, but 3 times. The last several weeks, the lectionary has been filled with readings from the book of Revelation, detailing John of Patmos' long vision of all kinds of bizarre things. 7 golden lampstands in cities with streets made of jewels, 4 strange creatures that have 6 wings each, 7 seals whose unsealing is accompanied by fear and thunder, multitudes of people gathered in one place from every nation. And now, today, from that same book, we read about a river that flows through the middle of this place, and a tree that somehow grows on both sides of that river and produces 12 different kinds of fruit. Also, today we read in Acts about Paul's vision of a man from Macedonia bidding him to come and help them. Now, I feel like we have a pretty good relationship with each other. I've been here a little bit over a year, and we know each other pretty well. So let's just be honest with one another. Visions are a little bit strange and kind of scary. I mean, if someone in this church were to stand up and say, "I had a vision of thus and so, and the church should do this," we would all probably take a collective breath and wonder a little bit about the person making the claim. After all, we can't control visions. We can't anticipate who will receive one or how they will react when they do. We can't predict their content. We can't say how we will be affected if we were to experience one. And we're really not all that open to discussing their meaning and value to our community with each other because of the negative connotation that accompanies them. At least that's what we like to tell ourselves. See, that's what we like to think, because thinking that way allows us to dismiss them, to strike them from our memory, to think of them as only something that pertained to the past, stories, fiction, if you will. It allows us to ignore them altogether, because visions might ask us to do something we're not ready to do. They might ask us to speak differently, act differently, be differently in the world. And that is scary. Merriam-Webster defines a vision as something seen in a dream, trance, or ecstasy, especially a supernatural appearance that conveys a revelation or a thought, concept, or object formed by the imagination, or a manifestation to the senses of something immaterial. Imagination, dreams, trances, revelations, moments of ecstasy, and manifestations of the senses sound more like things that belong in the new Ghostbusters movie than in a story about the birth of the church and the spread of the gospel. What we don't hear in Acts are any stories of Peter and Paul sitting down and drawing out a step-by-step plan of how to grow the church. We don't see them making a list of short and long-term goals to get them where they wanted to be in 5, 10, and 20 years. They're not colluding together. They're not scheming a way to get new families in the door, especially ones with children. They don't develop a strategy, a game plan, a course of action, a procedure, a policy, or a pattern to keep the church neat and in order, and of course, growing. Now here I'm on the edge of heresy, so let me just clarify. There's nothing wrong with things being neat and in order. I am a Presbyterian after all, and proud of it. There's also nothing wrong with strategies, goals, and plans. In fact, to maneuver your way through life, your education, your career, the business of living, having children, buying and selling property, and even taking care of your own health, requires us to have appropriate strategies, plans, and goals. They give us aim. They help us work toward desired results. When something goes amok, we can always look back at a strategy and figure out another way to get where we wanted to go. We can always reevaluate our goals and make new ones if we need to. We can always fall back on Plan B or Plan C. But visions, not so much. Visions come to us, and they take hold of us. They breathe life into us that we don't know where it comes from, and it gives our lives purpose. They excite us with ideas and possibilities. Let me ask you a question. Why are you here? And I'm not going to buy answers like because this is the way I was raised or it's what I've always done. No, I really want to know, why are you here? Are you here because you want to be filled up? Are you here because you want to help fill others up? Are you here to get your weekly dose of spirituality? Maybe you need a word of encouragement, a pat on the back. You're living a good life. Go and get out there. Maybe you want to hear a word of hope because otherwise you find the world to be hopeless. Are you here because you think you should be here? You need to be here in order to be a good person. Are you here because you had to make the coffee in Hannah Hall or teach a Sunday school class? You figure, well, my day's already shot. I might as well stay for the sermon. Don't laugh. It's a real reason. Are you here because your friends are here? Because you feel loved and valued here? Because it's exciting to be here. See, many of you spend a great deal of time in this building. You make an effort to get here on Sunday mornings, and some of you had to get not only yourselves ready, but also children or parents ready as well. You planned your weekend events around being here at this time on Sunday, and you didn't get here without effort. So why? Long-time members of St. Barnabas, Jim and Beth McLean, have been here since the beginning. They were invited to consider leaving their old church, a nice, wealthy, well-established, and well-run church, to come here and consider being part of a new church plant. Now, when they got here, they were shocked by the tiny size of the congregation that met here. This building didn't even exist. They met in the manse. In fact, in the downstairs, because the pastor and his family lived in the upstairs of the manse. Now, Beth will tell you that there were many times she wondered if they were crazy as they struggled to get this very church off the ground. But when you talk to Beth and Jim about what it was like to help start a new church, they can barely contain their excitement. It was exciting to be here on this property. And although Beth will be the first to tell you, it was also a bit nerve-wracking as they wondered from week to week if there would be enough money in that collection plate to pay the electric bill. Her voice changes. There's something totally different about it when she talks about that time in their lives. And Jim's face, it lights up with excitement. You don't even have to ask them what that time in their lives was like. You can tell from their body language. It was fun. It was risky. It was exciting. I love that way to describe the church. Exciting, and not just because I'm a pastor. See, this morning's reading in Acts invites us to consider that church from the time of its conception was just that, exciting, being led by visions, trust, listening to God. Paul didn't know what he was supposed to do. He didn't know where he was going. All he knew was that he had this strange vision, and he heard the voice of God call him by name, and it changed him. Suddenly, he knew he couldn't keep the good news of God's love to himself. But because of who he had been, he also knew all the things he should say and do and not do, to be within the bounds of what acceptable religion was. And he also knew all the things he should say and do and not do in order to stay safe in the empire. But those darn visions, they kept prompting him to push the boundaries. They kept sending him a different way, a new way. They kept introducing him to new people, all kinds of people, unusual people, people that he was not accustomed to being with, people that were not from his own tradition, people he would not have been allowed to be around before, people like Lydia in our story today. And he was meeting these new people all the time, and in each of them, he saw something he would have never seen before. In every person he met, he saw someone God loved. And those visions kept him telling the story over and over again to whoever he happened to meet along the way. Those visions kept life exciting. Now, people encounter visions all throughout the Bible. Peter, John of Patmos, and Paul, they're not the first ones. There are many, many others. But when you experience a vision, people are challenged to examine themselves and their faith, their being and doing in the world. And through visions, they're encouraged to look beyond their own expectations, to stretch their imaginations, to break out of the confines of complacency and lean into the unknown, into the what could be, and experience the energy of God in their lives. But visions aren't only for the people who actually have them. See, they're for the whole community. Following God's visions is how the church was born. It's how the church was built, not as a building with four walls, but as a people. In our reading this morning, a vision came to Paul in the middle of the night of a man pleading with him to come to Macedonia and help. And so he went. He went, perhaps expecting a man, because it was surely a man in his vision. But once there, he opens his heart to possibilities and instead encounters women. And especially one woman, Lydia. And Lydia is not so much one that he is helping as one that is and will continue to help him. She eventually plays a major role in establishing the church in Philippi. Now, a few of you may have noticed that the title of my sermon this morning comes from a classic movie, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The line is actually, "Strange things are afoot at the Circle K," and Ted utters these words when a friend of his suddenly appears in front of the Circle K in a photo booth time machine. But visions from God also cause strange things to be afoot. See, visions are almost always associated with radical change. Peter changes his entire view of Jesus' teachings, realizing that the gospel does not belong to any one people as if it were something to be possessed. Instead, it's ours to give away. In Revelation, John of Patmos details a vision that is very different from the world that he lives in, one where believers are afraid and persecuted. In his vision that he shares with his community, people are no longer afraid. In fact, they're bold enough to write the name of God on their bodies and to live lives filled with dreams of being in God's presence all the time. Paul's life is forever altered when he encounters a vision of the risen Lord on that road to Damascus, and in our reading again today, as his own travel plans are rerouted and God leads him to a new place and a new person, one that he might not have considered as one who would receive the word, much less as one that would nourish him with that same word. In Acts, visions grab hold of the disciples' lives, and they are expanded in very real ways that exponentially increase their understanding of community, of worthiness, and of God. Their visions fill them with excitement that cannot be contained by countries or borders or doctrines or governments or preconceived notions about who is or is not acceptable or worthy of God's love. In this season of Easter, we are asked again to listen to these testimonies of God's vision for the church and for the world. May strange things be afoot and lead us on excellent adventures. Amen.